what Matt said, thank you all for joining for our first virtual CRAN tour. We're excited that we're able to pivot and still bring the CRAN content to you, and thank you for joining. We're hoping to continue this over the next few months. So if anybody has a project that they'd like to share, please send it our way. And Matt has a production company that we could use to continue this. We want to make sure that we continue the momentum that CRAN has built over the past few years, and that COVID can't stop it. So thank you, Matt, for stepping up and being the first one. And Kit, thank you for putting all this together. I know it's a lot of work, and I know that right now everybody is just trying to keep afloat and figure this all out. So thanks, everybody. And
you're welcome.
As a kind of housekeeping, again, thank you to our sponsors. We have Exclusive Windows and Doors, Remy Steel Windows, Mirror Gallery, and we have AGS Stainless. And I think that Kevin is here, and he's invited some people from Seattle to join. So this virtual tour could be really great, that we could reach some other cities, because I know that other CRAN communities have been struggling to get the following that we have. So Mari and I, Mari's the co-chair, we're really excited about this. So during the video, we'll have about a 30-minute video from Matt and Kit. Feel free to throw Q&A on the Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your screen, just type in a Q&A as we're going. Then after that video, we'll do live questions, and I'll kind of mediate those, and Kit and Matt can answer. And then I think that's it for housekeeping. With that, I'll hand it over to sponsors, and then we can get started.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. And also, please let us know, give us feedback afterwards. Let us know how we can change or pivot or do things better next month so we can continue this. All right, thanks. I'll go mute now.
Perfect. Should I speak?
Yeah, Chris, I think you
got. Okay, hey, I'm Chris Brown with Exclusive Windows and Doors, a longtime AIA supporter and CRAN sponsor. We appreciate the opportunity to work with the architects that are involved, the builders and the designers, and known Kit for a number of years, as well as Matt and Maggie. So we're in good hands. Thank you so much for allowing us to be present. 30 days ago, I didn't know what Zoom was. Now I'm Zooming all over the place. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, that's so true, Chris. I was thinking that the other day. I think my first Zoom call was like a month ago, and now it's like I spent 3 hours on Zoom yesterday with 4 different calls or something crazy.
Exactly. Wow.
I guess we're ready to roll then, guys.
I'm just going to give Kevin a chance to talk real fast.
Sorry. I apologize.
Nope.
No problem. Hey, everyone. This is Kevin from AGS Stainless. We're excited to take this tour through Matt's place. We got a little preview a few seconds ago, and it's a great project. Our company does custom ornamental railing systems, stainless railing systems. We prefab the railings. We ship them out to you with the components numbered, ready to be installed. And I'd love to work with you on some of your projects. And with that, I'll hand it back to Matt.
All right, Kevin, sorry about that.
No problem.
All right, so we've got kind of an interesting deal here. And first off, I want to say huge honor to be on the AIA CRAN tour and to have a house tour. I've done this in the past live, and they're always amazing events. Weird to do it virtually, and my hope, though, is that we'll continue doing these virtually. And I think you guys know I'm in kind of a weird spot where I build houses and I make videos. So I have a full production company. We do videos every day, so this is no big deal for us. I don't want you to be nervous about doing this in the future because we've done a 2-camera shoot and all this kind of craziness, though. A lot of what you're going to see could easily have been done on your phone, where you just trim the beginning and the end and boom, you do it. And we want to encourage that. I heard someone say that the crew at Matt Ficus were thinking about doing a tour, and they were nervous about me going first. So I'm sorry, Matt and crew, for using expensive cameras for this, but don't feel like you need to do that. You know, I've been on YouTube for many, many years, 12 years now. And for the first half, all I used was like a flip video or an iPhone. So don't feel like you need really expensive equipment. With that said, Kit and I did a big kind of job site tour, and that's what we're going to play for the beginning of this. So let me go ahead and share screens, and let's get going on the tour, y'all. We're good to go. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. Oops.
So what do you do when you're
Sorry, this is not what I wanted.
actually lowered the pitch?
Let's go to full size. Let's go to full screen. Come on, YouTube, why are you not working for me? Well, we'll start it and then I'll go to full screen. Hey friends, how's it going? Our first virtual CRAN meeting, a little bit different than the usual ones where we meet on a job site in person. I've got with me the architect in the project. You all know Kit Johnson, Christopher Kit Johnson Architects. Hey. Kit, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Why don't you throw that mask in your pocket so it's not hanging off all day? We're not attractive? We're going to keep our distance as we're talking. So the purpose of today's meeting is, of course, to give you a tour of the house, but this is a kind of a special and unique house. This is actually my family's personal home. Sorry, one more second. There we go. But it didn't start that way. We've kind of evolved a little bit. We also have some pretty unique building science details going on here. We followed Joe Stiebrick's perfect wall concept on this house. And as kind of a result of really going for a super efficient build, we've realized that it would be wise to pursue passive house certification. So on this video, we're going to give you a tour. We're going to talk to you about the project. We're going to talk to you about perfect wall and kind of teach you some of those concepts from Joe Stiebrick at Building Science Corporation. And we're going to talk a little bit about Passive House Institute US, how this house fits, and why you might consider doing your projects in the future to that standard. But first, Kit, why don't you give us, for those of you who don't know anything about the project, give them kind of an intro on how we met and how we got started on this project.
Well, Matt, I don't know if you remember this, but it was actually at one of these CRAN meetings.
That's right.
This is pre-COVID-19, but you know, we were just chatting and you said, you know, hey, I bought the house right across the street. You know, I'm thinking about kind of just experimenting with it. Would you be interested in kind of working out a few details for me? I'm just thinking spruce it up. You know, I'm not gonna put a lot of money into it.
Like
I just kind of,
yeah,
it was really low. And yeah, I was like, yeah, sure, that'd be kind of interesting. I like some of the details that you do on your houses. And so I thought,
just
wow,
another reason why builders and architects need to mingle at CRAN meetings, right? Develop
marketing
those
is good.
Relationships.
Yeah.
Get your marketing down.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Kid.
So it's amazing to think that's where we started.
Yeah.
And what we're about to walk through today.
So a little background on the project. We're a 1970s neighborhood. I've actually lived basically right across the street for the last 13, 14 years. I know this neighborhood. I love it. This was a house that was owned by a neighbor who had been divorced and was getting ready to retire. The house was in terrible, really pretty dilapidated shape. But when I approached Kit, I said, you know, let's do a smallish remodel. I want to spend maybe 50 grand. I want to turn this into a nice project, but I don't want to go over the top. I think it'll be a family rental house, that sort of thing. Maybe my parents would come back and spend a month or two in the winter because they live back east. As that developed, the more and more we talked about it with my wife and I, we said, you know, this would be awesome. Why don't we move into this house? So then it was a bigger remodel. Let's transition a little bit with that as the background, hiring Kit and saying it's a small remodel. If you guys haven't seen my videos, I do videos on all kinds of different things, but I really focus on efficiency and durability, how to build a better house. I've tried to focus on building a better house each time I build. So for years now, I've researched all these different methods for building. I've seen all kinds of different building products. But the one concept that I always come back to that I think is really an interesting concept and can radically change the way we build in America is Joe Stiebrick's perfect wall concept. I'll put a link out so you guys can see that. It's just a couple page paper I read maybe 10 years ago, and it's taken me years to kind of understand it fully. We did a house a couple years ago with Rouser Architecture where we used those principles and it got on the cover of Fine Home Building. And so I wanted to use those principles, but do it in a way that would be maybe a little bit more of a family house oriented way, a more normal looking house. And Kit, with that as the background, why don't you tell us a little bit about the kind of architecture you're seeing here today, how it fits within the neighborhood, how people are going to perceive the house when it's all done.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, from the outset, it was just really, it started off just to be a little spruced up. You know, definitely we're in a 1970s neighborhood, kind of low slung, mostly single stories, certainly nothing higher than a 2-story house, none of the tower houses you see in Central Austin. So we wanted to keep up with that. Didn't want to be the obnoxious architectural house in the neighborhood. These are all Matt's friends and neighbors, and he loves them, and he doesn't want to be that guy. Yep. And so he came to me, he's like, okay, how do we spruce this up? So the initial ideas when we first looked at it were just some little doodads, and you can go back and see the early episodes of this. And so we haven't lost track of that. We've wanted to still, you know, spruce it up, but without, you know, trying to make it garish and obnoxious in the neighborhood. So with that, you know, we've really kept the same massing. Now, one thing we did was we raised the pitch on the 2-story volume, and then we actually lowered the pitch on the single story, and that's where we have our pop-up, and that's kind of the pizzazz. And we'll see that when we walk around the house. But for the most part, it still says quiet, it stays quiet.
Pretty subdued house.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to really fit within the neighborhood. So then with that as the background, let's go back to the perfect wall concept. Joe Stiebrick has this this paper about perfect wall where he says, you know, we could probably build a house out of standard materials, things like 2x4s and standard construction, but that house could last 500 years. And when I read that, I thought, you know, this is a concept we're not used to in America. I've been to England before, and I stayed in an English cottage that was built in the 1300s. And, you know, growing up in the East Coast, I'm used to seeing houses that were 100, maybe 150, 200 years old. But 500, that's crazy. That's really super rare. And obviously our country's not that old. But in Europe, that's pretty typical. It's pretty common to see houses that are 100, 200, 300 years old. So how do we do that? You know, we're talking about wood. Wood is an incredible building material. God's designed something that grows, that's sustainable, that sequesters carbon, that's easy for us as carpenters to build with. But what does wood need to be lasting and durable? It needs to be dry, right? Your dining room table that you got 20 years ago is still in great shape, right? It's in your dining room. It's in the air-conditioned envelope of your house. It's not getting wet. If you spilled some water on it accidentally, you wipe it up and it dries and it's fine. What if we treated our houses the same way as we did our dining room tables? What if we put all of our control layers on the outside in a way that would control, what are other control layers, by the way? We've got heat, air, vapor, and thermal, right? We've got, let's start with water, number one, liquid water. Our houses need to control water. If water gets in on a modern house with insulation and with modern codes, it's not gonna be able to dry. Houses that were built 100 years ago with no insulation, you know, when we remodel those houses, there's still some of those in Austin. They got wet, they dried, they got wet and dried, no problem. A modern house built to today's standards, if it gets wet, it's not gonna dry. The next thing we need to control is vapor. We need that vapor control on houses. We'll come back to that in a second. Air control is also vitally important because when air flows through houses, through leaks, through cracks, it brings with it moisture. And in our Texas climate in particular, where it's hot and humid outside, you know, it's not super hot right now, it's probably 70s, but it's real humid, I'm sweating. And if you were to bring a cold glass of water outside, you would see sweat gathering on that. When air leaks in, it's bringing moisture with it that can condense in our houses, and that's going to cause problems. And then the last control layer for our houses is thermal. That's our insulation layer. What's the best place for that insulation? Should we be stuffing that in between our stud cavities? Or should we put a bunch of that insulation on the outside of the house? And this is kind of the genesis of Perfect Wall. I'd highly encourage you to read the paper. But we're using a lot of those concepts where we've got continuous control layers from the foundation, from the slab of this house, all the way up to the peak of the roof, continuous, without any breaks. And that's really what we're going to show here. Now let's walk up to the house kit and we can talk about a couple of those layers. I do want to say that we had another architect involved in this project as well, an out-of-town architect, a friend of mine named Steve Basic, who's based out of Boston. Steve did an incredible job of working with Kit and I. Kit did the heavy lifting on the architecture and the permits and the floor plan, really all the details for the siding and all that sort of thing. But all these details that are kind of behind the scenes and hidden, this is where Steve helped me out tremendously and did a great job, didn't he, Kit?
He's fantastic. He's a big brother.
He's a big brother, that's right. So what you're seeing here is we've got 2 inches of exterior insulation. You could use all kinds of different products, and I have over the years. I ended up using foil-faced polyiso on the outside of the house. This is 2 inches. And what you're seeing on the outside of the house is that it's running from the foundation all the way to the peak of the house. And it's a little hard to tell here, but if you look at the side of the house, you can start to get a feel for what's happened here. See how there's 2 layers on the roof right there? And then you've got these 2x4s right here. They're kind of above the insulation. What we did was we framed this house with a term that I just pulled out of the hair called monopoly framing. In other words, when we framed the house first, we framed it without any overhangs. The green Huber zip sheathing you're seeing on here goes straight up the wall and then transitions right to the roof. We cut the rafters at the wall line and ran the sheathing up. And so there was no overhangs. It looked like a very modern monopoly house, let's say. The idea was then we could run our wall insulation all the way up without a break and then transition to the roof. And you can kind of see that here. See, we've framed a flat soffit right here, but we framed it after the insulation. And this happens to be our kind of garage edition, but if you pop in over here, you can see what's happening in the garage, where these rafters in the garage were framed after the wall insulation was put on. So we framed the walls. This floor joists were here. We framed the walls on top, just traditional platform framing. And then we bolted on that ledger you see right there. That's a, I don't know, 2x8 or 2x10 LVL ledger. And we bolted that on with some real long bolts. Those are Spax power lags, basically a modern lag screw. That's lagged all the way through the foam back into the LVL beam that's back there. So now even this roof isn't breaking my thermal layer. And as we walk around to the front door, you can see the same thing happening here for this porch roof. The frame carpenters put all that insulation up and then framed the roof on top of that. So all the overhangs happen in the same manner here, including the overhangs for the main house. So if we look up here, you can see we've got these 2x4 LVLs that are sticking out as rafter tails. Those aren't the rafters to the roof. Those are a fake tail. Now, of course, those are going to be hidden. We're going to use some James Hardie products on the outside to get a mixture of both brick and Hardie plank on the outside of the house. But those are giving the structure so we could make an over roof. I've found over the years, all the rot, all the mold, all the problems with houses typically happens in the lower section of the house. You know, those gutters got removed or got overflowed. The water runs off the roof, it splashes back. And so we're really taking care and attention for that bottom 1 to 2 feet. But that umbrella over the house, that big overhang, I've got a 2-foot overhang basically everywhere in the whole house, is giving us a huge measure of extra durability. It's also giving us a little bit of a sun umbrella, right? Texans 100 years ago wore big cowboy hats. And the big cowboy hats served a purpose, even in the hot days, to keep the sun's rays off of us. So having a cowboy hat on your house makes a lot of sense in our Texas climate. Kit, let's transition to you. We talked about perfect wall a little bit. Yep. That's that concept of those continuous control layers all the way from the foundation to the ridge. Let's meet you inside and we'll talk floor plan.
All right, so Matt's been talking a lot about the details, you know, Steve Brick's perfect wall house and all that, which is all good, but it might be good just to reverse a little bit, just to talk about the big ideas. This is our architect audience. So, you know, with the house, once Matt decided, like, you know what, we're not just gonna spruce up the outside, we're gonna really tackle this thing and we're gonna do it right. And so in getting into it, you know, some of the big driving ideas were light, just bring in a bunch more light. This is typical 1970s house. You've got all the light on one side of the house and it's totally not balanced by any other openings in the house. So that was a huge driving idea. Another idea was like more space, just clean it up. You know, before when Matt purchased it, there was a huge stairway here. The kitchen was tucked all the way back over here on the west side of the house. And then we had our living room over here. So one thing that came out real clear in the early design process was like, hey, can we just get rid of that stair? Because that's the thing that's messing everything up. Because we were talking about ideas about like, how do you look around the stair and connect the kitchen to the great room? So got rid of the stair. The stair is going to be finished out over here against this wall, and we'll go into that in a second. But that completely changed everything. Another thing that changed everything up was Matt, again, tried to stick with, work with what he had, the bones with what he had, but it didn't take him long. I mean, gosh, you had just gotten into demolition when, just looked at all the mold and water damage. And Matt made the calls like, hey, I'm just tearing it down to the slab. So everything came all the way down to the slab. So we have these beautiful LVL studs in here, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge donation, by the way. I got a bunch of that donated. It's such an amazing position I'm in that people are wanting to give me some things for my house. Not everybody gets that, I admit.
But beautiful. I've never salivated over studs before. Beautiful studs.
But going to 9 foot, right? Wasn't that huge?
Huge. I mean, it's amazing, that 1 foot. I mean, again, typical 1970s house. We got that 8-foot ceiling. It wasn't so bad when the house was chopped up so much, but now that we've opened it up, and the kitchen was what was the big scare. Once we, got all this opened up and we looked at what the kitchen was at 8 feet, man, this is a pancake house. It's terrible. So raise it up to 9 feet made all the difference.
And if I could pop in there real quick, I haven't talked about passive house yet. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But one of the driving factors on that height for me was I really, over the years, have wanted to do slab insulation. The first time I ever did it actually was on Scott Ginder's house, if you know him from Forge Craft. Scott and I built a house together for his personal family, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. We built some really high performance things, and that was my first insulated slab edge, where we insulated the outside of the slab. The details were hard on that. It wasn't easy to get an insulated slab, but I see the benefit of it because this slab in the wintertime draws a lot of heat out of the building. So in working with Steve Basic, Steve has a detail that I'd seen before in the Northeast where they basically pour a standard slab and then you insulate on top of the slab and then add new subfloor. And that's what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to add 1.5 inches of rigid insulation on top of this existing 1970 slab. I'm so thankful that I'm basically on rock out here. The slab hasn't changed at all since it was poured in the 70s. So we're going to add 1.5 inches of insulation. And then on top of that, I'm going to do a floating subfloor detail. We're going to use 3/4 inch Huber Advantex subfloor. We're going to do 2 layers that are glued and screwed together. That's going to float over top of that. Sounds crazy, but it actually works. I've been in houses like this in Boston, have been built with that method. So that now I don't have any weirdo details. There's no termite issues, none of that. All I have to do is put that insulation down and put that subfloor on top. Now I've got this huge thermal break on top of my slab. Big, big deal. Now basically my house has insulation on the bottom, up the sides, and all the way up the roof, continuous. We're going to talk about passive house in a minute, but that extra 3 inches on top of the slab made a big difference in my ceiling height decision and ultimately deciding to tear the house down and start new. There just wasn't enough salvage value, and there's so much rat issues and rot and mold and all kinds of stuff on the 70s house that have made it. Kit, talk to me about what you did in terms of changing this layout to work with my family, and also talk to me a little bit about the second floor, and then we can walk up there.
Yeah. So, well, just back down here, the whole big idea of more light. And so once we open this up, the other thing we did was also open up the front here. And so now we've literally got, it's glazed in, but it's essentially a dog trot house, aesthetically at least. It's letting the light through. So we've got that's opened it up. And now our light's, much more balanced. We got the big kitchen, Matt's got 4 kids. They're all growing, eating a lot. Big family kitchen now that we've got. We've actually we took a little bit of space from the garage and so made the kitchen really sized for a modern kitchen. Yep. And so that was a big change. But the big thing here is just got rid of a lot of the rooms, and now we have the great room with now the backdrop is either you're looking out onto the backyard or we've got this beautiful stair that's going to be coming in here. This will be fully detailed out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tuck away, they do a lot of homeschooling. And so we've got little pockets all around the house for the kids to study. And so underneath the stair here, we're going to have, a hidden door that's going to hide a little work area underneath the stair. But this will be a beautiful backdrop to the great room here.
Yeah, we're going to use a fair amount of wood on the inside too. Kit and I are working with Kim Truss on the interior design, and we've got a plan for some wood ceilings in here, and then some wood along this wall and some wood into the pop-up,
which, by the way, you mentioned that earlier. Talk to me about this pop-up kit, because everyone who comes in here mentions that, and I love this detail.
Well, the pop-up makes it. You know, it came from necessity. When we moved the stair from over there to here, we had to do something to be able to provide the head height to give us the space to get up there. But when you're doing that, it's just an opportunity to bring some light in. And so rather than have, more skylights, we've got the 6 windows up here that are letting light in. We've got it on both sides. And essentially it's just this big light well that's going to completely light up the interior here, bounces off the white wall, and the great room now has all the light that Christy wanted. That's what I heard from the very beginning was like, more light, more light. Every time I talked to Christy, it was more light. And so this is definitely going to bring all the light that she's looking for.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah. Before we transition to the upstairs kit, let me talk a little bit about this wall over here, because you can see the backside of the sheathing here. This is zip system sheathing we use on the outside, which is that green or brown system that uses tape on the outside. I've used a lot of different systems over the years, but one of the benefits of zip system and all the peel and sticks that you've seen me use is that you not only get really good waterproofing, but you get really good air tightness. And we're going to talk about passive house in a minute, but regardless of whether you're going for a passive house rating, having a very airtight house is critical, especially for us in Texas. We need to take control of the airflow and not let our houses breathe. Everyone always comments on my YouTube videos when I talk about air tightness. Oh, these houses are too tight. You're going to kill people. They need to breathe. No, you and I need to breathe. Our houses need to be tight. If we don't build a tight house, if air can leak in under the bottom plates, around windows, around outlets and doors and that sort of thing, when that air leaks in, especially in Texas, it's bringing pollen. I don't know about you, but I have cedar fever and cedar allergies. It's bringing all the mold that's in the air, and a lot of days the mold count in Texas is crazy high. It's also bringing humidity in the house, and regardless of that, it's bringing the outside temperature in, and we're spending money to air condition our houses or to heat our houses. We don't want that air to come in just anytime the wind blows. We want to get the tightest envelope we possibly can, and then we want to install a fresh air system that will bring air in, funny timing with the wind blowing, to bring air in on our terms when we want it to come in, right? I didn't want that air to blow in right then, but I need a continuous puff of fresh, filtered, dehumidified air in my Texas home. You need that wherever you are in the world, whether you're in Minnesota or whether you're in the tip of the Florida Keys. We want that air to come in on our terms. So what we did with that monopoly framing was we framed the house with these walls that went right into the roof line. We taped everything with zip system sheathing tape. That's that tape that goes on there. And then we did some really good air sealing details where the bottom plate hit the concrete and also where the sheathing hit the concrete on the outside. So we've got a very tight envelope on the outside of the house. Now we could have done that, as I said, with a peel and stick product. I've used a lot of Polywall's AlumaFlash. That's a great waterproofing and air sealing product for the South. I've also used a lot of the Casella Dorkin products, which are German products. Those are very vapor permeable, and those work great too. They're also very airtight. This is a product I thought was an interesting choice too. We decided, because this wall is between my garage and my house, I was only going to be able to put batt insulation in here, and the whole rest of the house, as you saw, has R13 continuous insulation. And my garage, I was trying to figure out, how do I get air tightness, and I want a thermal break. I want some insulation there. So I ended up doing this 1.5" R system sheathing. This is R6.6. So it's about half of what my other walls are, but it's going to be pretty temperate in that garage compared to the outside walls. And I sheathed that again with that same zip system sheathing so I could tape it all. And then we're going to do some tape details between this and the concrete slab. And then we'll also have to air seal with some more zip system sheathing that ceiling line in my garage later, so that my house stops here and my garage is thoroughly sealed off. Another big thing that's really important detail-wise as we're talking about air tightness is anywhere we penetrate this envelope. For instance, see how my wall stops right there, and then I've got these joists that continue on? I block those joists off ahead of time before my mechanicals start. And it's critical to tell your HVAC guy, your plumber, and your electrician, for every hole you drill, you can only put one thing in that hole. One wire, one pipe, one whatever, if it's going to the outside of my envelope. So where my pipes penetrate here, I don't want one big hole with several pipes going through. I just want one small hole with one pipe going through so that I can detail that for air tightness. I'll probably end up coming back and using some spray foam in this one particular spot. That's a very tricky spot, but I don't need to rely on spray foam really anywhere else for the house for air tightness. All my air tightness is on the outside. Now, I mentioned earlier that perfect wall concept. In the past, that house that I did a few years ago with Eric Rouser, we did nothing but outside insulation. On this house, I'm doing a mix. I wanted this to be a little more kind of normal, so to speak. So we did 2 inches in the walls, 4 inches in the roof. My walls on the outside are about R13, and we're a little shy of R26 on the roof. And then on the walls, I'll be able to come in and use batt insulation. I'll probably use rock wool, kind of like what you're seeing in the ceiling line here on these walls, because I don't need to worry about air tightness. I don't need spray foam for some air tightness benefit. And over the years, when I've done nothing but spray foamed houses, I'm always a little bit disappointed with the blower door results. So what we're doing here is we're not relying on any of that. What we're doing is sealing everything on the outside. Kid, anything I missed as I was talking about some of those details?
No, I mean, I think you got it. I think it's just good for the audience to hear. I mean, it's just really thinking those through. And it's not just from what you need to tell your subs about, you know, penetrations through the wall.
Yep.
I mean, it's getting in, you know, the head of the architect and the architect's staff. I mean, like, hey, you need to be thinking about this clear delineator between inside and outside, not just outside environment, but I mean, looking at your garage as an outdoor environment too, with all its, you know, pollutants.
Before we go upstairs, let me transition for just a second, and let me talk to you for a second about passive house principles. I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not a certified passive house builder yet. I will be taking those classes. But this is an interesting concept that I've not really talked a whole lot about on the channel, even though I've visited several certified houses and been to several houses under construction that were pursuing certification. So passive house, if I could boil it down, and I'm looking at notes, sorry about that. It's basically utilizing a set of design principles to attain a very quantifiable, meaning we can say we can calculate the numbers, but also a very rigorous and testable level of energy efficiency, meaning you know, thermal efficiency, and also air tightness for a house. And these are my words, not Passive House Institute, but so it could passively survive. I kind of think of this as a standard which originally started in Germany in the 1980s, where we've got a very cold climate. We've got maybe a grid system that could go down. If you're in a climate that's 10 degrees outside and the power goes off, if you have a traditional house that's leaky and not very well insulated, how long is it going to take to get uncomfortable and maybe even have some people not be able to be in their homes anymore? What about pipes bursting? All these things. On the other hand, if you build a super well insulated and super airtight house, if the power went out and you were -10 out because your body's generating some heat, you could probably live in a house if it was built well enough for several days without power and be okay. Now let's translate that now to America. Passive House Institute US, FIAS. We've kind of adopted our own standards here in America, and we've said, you know, our climate isn't just Germany's climate, right? We've got Minnesota and Florida all in the same country. Texas, a very different climate zone than Germany. A couple years ago, they've kind of modified those standards a little bit, and now we actually have a climate zone version of Passive House, which means that I can build a slightly different house with slightly different standards in Texas than I am if I'm going to get a certified house in Boston or some other place. Now, when we think about passive house, we think very high levels of insulation, very airtight. In fact, a blower door score that's crazy low. We also have some components that are a part of that need to be really good components, and windows is a big part of that. Now, when I started this project, I wasn't thinking I was going to be passive house. In fact, I spec'd all double glaze, you know, windows and doors that would meet code, but weren't crazy expensive, nor were they crazy well insulated. I'm working with JELD-WEN on this house, and when I made some of the changes with Kit from the remodel to a new build, we upgraded some of the windows in the house, not all of them, to triple glaze. And I got, at that point, a passive house energy modeler involved who modeled the house and said, actually, If we have a mixture of double and triple glaze on the house, and we switch out this front and back door to a more efficient unit than just a standard double glaze, I think you're actually going to make passive house standard. This was the first kind of aha moment that I said, gosh, I should pursue that certification if for no other reason than I want to teach people how to build really good houses. And I want to encourage us as Americans, us as Texans, to build better and to build buildings that are going to last like we have in other parts of the world. I think we have had a tendency to build buildings that are related to the first cost and yet get torn down and aren't particularly efficient or comfortable or durable in the short lifespan that they have. So this house is intended to be a little bit of a model for that. I'll put a link to this in the description, but they've changed with this Climate Specific Passive House Institute US, some of those standards so that, for instance, in Climate Zone 2, where we are here, I need a mixture of windows, double and triple glaze, that are going to end up with an overall U factor of 0.18. Now, code in our area is somewhere around 0.32, I believe, for U factor. So I can have some double glaze windows. I'm also going to need some triple glaze and some very efficient units. And for solar heat gain coefficient, as long as we're below 0.3, we're going to make their standards. What else did I miss? I think that's it on passive house for now. There's so much more that could be said. But the idea of passive house is super well insulated, super airtight, and then we're going to bring fresh filtered air in on our terms. And here in the South, we're going to use an ERV, an energy recovery ventilator, so that we can also exchange some of that moisture. We're going to use a dehumidifier in this house. I've been working with my friends at Positive Energy. If you're here in Austin, you know them. Great mechanical designers. They've done a fantastic design for me. I'm going to be using all Mitsubishi equipment. We've got very small equipment. I don't have a lot of load on this house. And then we're going to use a Zender unit for fresh air. So we've got just a little puff of fresh air going into all my bedrooms and my main spaces all the time. That's filtered air, and it's balanced ventilation. So when I bring air in, I'm pushing air out at the same time. I've got a daughter that has asthma, and I really want to make sure that this is a very, very clean air house. I don't want any allergens in the air, and I want to make sure this is very healthy air. And then lastly, I haven't quite worked out all the details yet, but I'm interested in this house being a net zero or a net positive house. And I think this is why I like passive house so much and why it's intrigued me so much, is that if we build to this standard, it's really not going to take a lot of solar on the roof. And I like solar because it's a static system. Once you set it and forget it, there's no moving parts. There's no maintenance really. There's nothing that needs to be done. That if I put enough on, I could be net positive. I could actually give back to Austin Energy and get paid for more energy than I'm even using in the house. I have a feeling we'll have some questions and comments on that, and we're going to get into more of this in the future. But Kit, why don't we go upstairs? We'll talk a little bit about the upstairs design, and then maybe we could pop out onto this real flat roof right above us and talk about a few of the details outside.
That'd be good.
All right, we'll meet you upstairs. Kit, I love this stairwell, man. I think this light in here, once we do some wood walls in here, it's really going to bathe that downstairs in light, and it's such a feature on the house.
I mean, that was definitely the ba-boom moment.
I love it.
You come up here, and I mean, every time, it's funny, I'll be up here, and every time I turn around and just look at that, it came out great.
But this room, on the other hand, my wife's excited about this. I live in about a 2,100 square foot house now with our 4 kiddos, and we just have one main living space. There's no secondary space. And as my kids are transitioning into the teen years, we've got kids coming over, we've got friends. There's nowhere to go except for just all in one space. So having this secondary room is going to be incredible for us. Walk me through what's happening upstairs architecturally.
Yeah, so this has become what's been dubbed now as the teen room. So they're sequestered off. They've got their own space. You know, where this all really happened was, that's where the stair was originally. This whole floor plane was chopped up. And then we've added about 12 feet, you know, really it's about right here. And then from over here, this is all new floor that we've extended over the existing roof.
Yep.
Stair was over there. So what that allowed us is to give, you know, big sister the big room. We've got that, you know, rid of the stair.
Yeah, so my daughter's in this larger bedroom.
She has her
own bathroom over here.
Yep.
Which is really nice.
Own bathroom, great natural light, plenty of closet space.
Yep.
But that getting rid of that stair helped so much to give us that. And she's got her own world here, away from the boys.
Yeah,
and so
nice.
now the boys.
So my daughter is my oldest. She's 14, and then I've got 3 boys behind her that are all 2 years apart. And they're all going to be down here in their own bedroom. And as we're going by this space too, this is probably my wife's second favorite space in the house, which is a linen closet, which we don't have in our current spot. So having a spot for linen's amazing. And then this room is my bunk room. So basically I'm hoping that my boys will, for many years until they're out of the house, stay in the same bedroom. I figure you're gonna have a roommate your whole life. Might as well not have your own bedroom as a kid, right?
It is so cool. They're all going to be in here in their own little deal. You can lock them off.
Yep.
They're completely at this side of the house.
Yeah, they almost have a little suite back here in some respects. So we've got one window for each one of their beds, one big closet here, and then there will be a sliding barn door here. And then this room will end up being kind of a secondary bedroom, living space. Maybe if they have friends over for the night, this would be an easy spot to have a second bed. And then we've got now closet 2 and closet 3 as well. So each one of the boys will have their own kind of closet space. I think this is going to be a terrific space. And then the other space, we don't have a ladder right this second, but if we were to pop upstairs to the attic, man, Kit, I love this attic space. When we transitioned from thinking about remodel to building new, one of the things I said to you was, you know, how could we get a little bit more attic and storage space? In Texas, we don't have basements like I did growing up in the Northeast. All our mechanicals are in our attics, but all of our junk, all of our stuff is in our garages. And with 4 kids and bikes, I got no room for a car. I barely have room for my tools and my equipment. So having an attic space, incredible. We worked with Smith Structural Engineering and Whit Smith. You guys from Austin probably know those guys, been around 30 years. Whit's dad started the company, and Whit's a second-generation engineer. I worked with him to design an LVL truss system for this roof so that we would have this giant open space, plenty of room. I'll have one of my Mitsubishi zones upstairs to take care of this floor. My Zender fresh air unit will be upstairs as well. But other than that, I've got great storage space up there and plenty of room for future additions of mechanicals or whatever else I might need. I didn't mention this, but my hot water system for the house is going to be heat pump water heater system. I'm going to use an 80-gallon heat pump. We're going to put that in the garage space within the garage to kind of make that part of the conditioned envelope. What else am I missing up here?
I don't know, just the fact back upstairs to the attic, I mean, we added a window there and just the huge difference.
Forgot about that.
Simple idea. And then, and really, I mean,
Gable
you know,
window.
yeah. And back to the framing. I mean, that's kind of old school. I mean, Whit's taken a more modern approach to it, but it's like some of the houses we grew up with.
Yeah.
Simple, you know, we've almost taken for granted we're doing, you know, pre-engineered trusses.
Yeah, it's almost like we forget that we don't have to do
Exactly.
trusses.
It's like so, and it makes so much, a huge difference.
Yeah, and those are more certainly than an engineered truss system. But to gain that kind of space for storage, and of course, my envelope is at the roof line, right? So my air conditioning envelope, my air sealed envelope is all the way up to the peak of the roof. So all that storage space up there is within my air conditioned envelope. We'll insulate inside in the rafter space with some traditional bats. But because I've got that 4 inches of rooftop insulation, that space is really going to be temperate and very, very much the same temperature as the rest of the house. Kit, why don't we pop out this window onto this real flat roof over here and talk about a couple details outside. Yep, I'll meet you out there. All right, guys, we're on the pop out. This is the second story roof, or first story roof, I should say, over my master. These are those windows that are going to feed that light down in here. And now you can see a couple of these details, which is kind of fun. Here's my wall insulation right here. And then here's the 2 layers of rooftop insulation you can see, because we haven't run this yet. These are going to end up being triple glaze JELD-WIN windows. And we left this top foam off for the head flashing and all the other waterproofing that's going on there. But it's kind of fun that you can see all those details. And then the roof got framed on top of that. Now we did a slightly different detail here with these LVLs on the flat. And this overhang's only 16 inches, whereas the rest of the house is 24. But talk to me about the roof. It will come on here eventually, Kit.
Well, so what we're talking about, you know, we got this super low pitch, and I know that was a huge concern of yours, but we really wanted to have that just kind of eyebrow flat look when you were looking at it from the street.
Yep.
And so the solution was, because it's a small roof area, is really just, we think we can get a large enough enough piece of sheet metal to where we just have a single break right there in the middle to make the ridge.
Yeah.
And that way we're not going to have any penetrations. There's certainly no vents or anything coming through here. So, you know, I think that was the win-win, where we're still getting that really, you know, flat eyebrow thing that was the original concept with this pop-up. So,
And then we'll do a standing seam metal roof on the rest of the roof. And again, I'm standing on the second layer of zip system sheathing, so that really this is just my watershed layer, but the layer below this is my air sealing layer. Let's talk about this gable next. I love this view because now you can see on this gable, this is my second story pop-up over here. That insulation is continuous all the way up to the peak of my roof and basically rolls right onto my roof insulation. So my roof deck is right here. My wall insulation comes up. I've got my 2 layers of roof insulation here. Then we'll put our hardy soffit on here coming down. And then we've started putting our battens on. It's really important when you've got a cladding on the outside of the house to have an air gap behind that cladding. We want that hardy plank, in this case, that goes up on a batten system. I still have battens to come here to have an air gap behind it so that any water that gets past it, we can just hit that ventilation area and drain right out and not have a problem. We'll put a bug screen at the top and the bottom. That also allows me to take advantage of the foil facing that you're seeing on the outside of this foam. This foil facing is going to act as a radiant barrier. So when the sun hits that hardy and any of those radiant rays that get back there are going to get rejected by this. If this was butted up tight, a radiant barrier would not work. It needs that air gap in front of it. And then this is a great spot to see what else we've got going on here. That wall insulation went on. The roof framing went on top of that, and now you can see all of my overhangs are bolted on after the fact. So these overhangs then get bolted on with a real long power lag from Spax that gets basically like a lag screw all the way back into the framing. And now my overhang, all this detail of my closed soffit will look like a normal house. Everyone in the neighborhood's house looks similar, but they have traditional vented roofs that are very, very inefficient. And in my case, I've got an air-conditioned attic. All of my Christmas decorations are gonna live within the same AC space as the rest of my house. Because I've got this solid blanket of insulation on the outside with perfect wall style, I don't need to worry about much BTUs from the sun's heat getting through. Very little is going to make it through. And what little makes it through, I've got a very small mechanical system to cool or to heat in the wintertime. And then I've got that fresh air ventilation system that's balanced to bring in fresh air when I need it. And I've got a separate ultra air dehumidifier that's dehumidifying my house air. So this house, it's really going to sip energy. It's not going to use a whole lot. And this roof right here happens to be facing south and west. Perfect spot for me to do a small solar array to power the house. I'm still working on some of those calculations, so I don't have all that yet, but it's coming soon.
we got a great pitch too.
Yeah.
312.
Yeah, 312, so easy.
Yeah.
Kid, I think that's about it. Anything else you can think of to close this out?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
Yeah, we did.
Really appreciate you guys joining us. If you're watching this from the AIA CRAN meeting, Kit and I are going to do a live Q&A from the house. I have internet over here, so we should be able to do a live Q&A and walk through the house. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, I really appreciate you joining me.
Okay. How we do, guys?
That was great.
Thanks, Maggie.
Cool.
How was the transmission on that on your end?
Oh man, look at this
That's
attic.
even better.
Is that me?
Awesome. We're coming to you
I
from
think that's
my
me, I'm
house. This
sorry.
is our real rebuild project.
That was me. I'm sorry.
So we do have a couple questions in the typed in Q&A. Everybody that's listening, please feel free to add questions to that. One is from Travis Young. Hey, Travis.
Hey, Travis.
Travis.
Would like to know how you structurally anchored the overhangs to the top plate of the house if they do not break the insulation plane. Also, I'm curious about window anchor details to the exterior wall through the 2 inches of polyiso.
Yeah, let me plug in my headset. Can y'all still hear me?
Yep.
Great question, Travis. Generally speaking, whenever you've got exterior insulation and you're going for perfect wall, you've got to somehow get all of that support back to framing. And the easy way to do it is what I did is I used a lag. Basically, I used Spax power lags. There's a bunch of options out there. Simpson makes them, but it's a screw that we can take. Let's say if this is my zip right here, then I've got my foam. Then I've got a 2x4 or a ledger board, whatever it is. I can screw that through. That foam has a pretty high. I think the foam's around PSI of 16. Pounds per square inch. So as long as you're spreading that force out with a ledger, you can screw that foam on and it won't collapse. And that way I was able to bolt on all those overhangs really easily. I didn't talk a whole lot about the window install. I probably should have. Kid, I wonder if you'd be willing to pop outside by that laundry room and show them what the 2x2 detail looks like at that window over there.
Yeah. So, and while I'm doing that too, you just might add on too about just the, a fair amount of on those rafters, for your overhangs is carried up on top of the roof. Travis, if you go look at some of Matt's old videos on that, then, you can really kind of see how much of the cantilever is how that's really handled. So, okay. So over here, was this the window you were talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you just go up to that one, Kit? You can kind of show them live.
Right.
So Travis, what you're seeing there is that, let's see, Kate, you better talk through it so that your video comes through as the main video.
Okay. Yeah. So, essentially what's going to happen, because we've got this extra depth of the insulation on the outside, it's just the whole window is going to have to be bucked out to where it'll be, mounted. So have something there. So that's all going to have to be built out here. And Matt, we've got a finless window here, right? This is one of the finless ones.
Yeah, maybe you could walk around the front of the house, Kid, and show them one of the installed windows, like in the master somewhere. Basically, Travis, we used a rip of pressure-treated wood, a 2x2-inch thick rip to match the 2 inches on the polyiso. So I've got that R13 everywhere, but I've got this little 2-inch rip around my windows that will have some thermal bridging. That's really the only thermal bridge.
There we go. Let me go to these two.
Yeah, so if you go to that next window, you're cutting out on us a little bit, Kit. There we go. So it's hard to see because of, we can see it. It's hard to see because of the tape detail. Basically behind that window, that window is mounted to the outside. The air and water control layer is back at the zip, but the face of the polyiso, the aluminum face, becomes the drainage plane. So those windows are draining to the face of the aluminum on the polyiso on the outside.
So I have a question. With doing this as a remodel versus a new build, your foundation is as wide as your framing. How did you, with that extra wall depth and wall thickness, how did you handle that? Did you have to pour around like a brick lug or something basically to account for that thickness?
Yeah, we did actually. So we didn't get a whole lot into the materials on the house, but the front of the house has a brick lug, and it was brick, and we're putting brick back. In fact, I saved the brick. Maybe you can show them that, Kit, right in the backyard. But we saved all the brick that we took down on the house. We chipped off the mortar, and we're going to reuse it, which meant that because I've got exterior insulation, I had to pour a bigger or deeper brick lug. And my engineer came up with a really straightforward detail where we basically doweled into the there's the side. Actually, that's interesting right there, Kit. You're looking at the side of the house where the brick lug went down the side, and I decided not to use brick all the way back just for cost reasons. I wanted to go with siding. So what we did was we saw cut an angle on that brick lug and then parged it. So the brick lug stops at the front of the house 5 feet back or 10 feet back, something like that, where the fence line is going to be. And then we'll transition to siding from there. But we basically doweled into the foundation at the front at an angle and did a series of rebar and then poured an additional depth on the brick lug to accept that foam so I could have it behind that brick. And you can see that right there. Kit's showing that to you on the front of the house.
Okay. Mark Richardson, And I think all of us have the same question, sort of a cost to value analysis. Do you have any idea of what sort of increase in cost this method is relative to traditional framing and insulation methods?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to quantify because I have honestly gotten a lot of materials free, but I've paid every penny of the labor. So I can tell you what those bills look like. You know, I got a lot of material donations, but I haven't gotten anything free for anybody swinging a hammer. It's probably on order of, let me just think about it as a per square foot basis. So this house is just shy of 3,000 feet. It's like 2,800 square feet. And my guess is I'm going to spend, if this was labor and materials inclusive, on the things to get me to passive house and perfect wall all combined. I'm thinking mechanicals. I'm thinking exterior insulation, all those details. It's probably an extra 100,000 on this project. So what would that be on a square footage basis divided by 2,800? Who's got a calculator in front of them? I'll pull it up real fast.
It's kind of 250 or 300 per square foot, million, 10%.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
I mean, I think on a cost to value, you're getting a huge value out of not a big increase in cost.
We're talking, it probably added $40 a square foot to the project. Now remember, I'm not paying builder fee to myself. So there's a benefit there. So if this was a client job, I'd say it's probably going to, you know, if you want to go to these standards, you're probably talking about adding $50 a square foot to your project.
Okay.
Something like that. So if this remodel was $300 a square foot, I'd say, you know, we're probably looking at $350 a foot for a project like this. Huge benefit to reuse the slab.
Long term.
Long term, I mean, we saved a bunch of money not having to demo out the slab. And also the other thing that I've talked about in some of the videos that I made with Kit months ago was there's a huge benefit of starting with a remodel, even though we ended up scraping it, because had I built this new, my wife and I, if we wanted to dream and, you know, go to H-E-B and fill whatever we want in the cart, we would have filled the cart with nothing but T-bone steaks, and this would have been a 5,000 square foot house. But being constrained to the footprint helped us, you know, kind of keep it compact. And 2,800 square feet for a family of 6 is not crazy big. It's, you know, it's big. Don't get me wrong. I've been to Haiti and lots of third world countries where this looks like the king's mansion. But 3,000 square feet is not crazy in Austin in terms of being over square footage. And that helped too. You know, we had some relatively modest goals in terms of size of house. And so that helped us with overall budget. Did we answer that for you, Maggie?
Yes, definitely. And I think that all of us, as long as we're armed with that, we know what huge value this would add. So to talk to clients through that is a great lesson. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome.
Getting a lot of questions about mitigating termites and termite mitigation with exterior foam. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about this insulated slab detail is that I'm not doing anything on the outside of the slab. Like when we did Scott Ginder's house years ago, we had to do a bunch of funky termite details because the foam was kind of getting buried into the slab. You couldn't see it afterwards. In this house, one of the things I love about it is it's just a crappy 70s production builder house slab. There's nothing special about it. If we were to build this new, it wouldn't have been anything special either. Termites, generally speaking, will come up through penetrations in the slab, and they can get into your framing in places where you can't see. They'll also tunnel on the outside of your slab and get in that way. So I do need to do a good job of inspecting visually once a year on the outside of my house. And then all of my new plumbing that I brought in, I use Termimesh, which if you're not familiar, it looks like a stainless steel collar that goes on all your pipe penetrations. And because I replumbed the house, I only have one plumbing penetration in the whole house, just one line in. Everything else is going above. I have no island sink, none of that stuff. Everything's going up. And I've only got maybe 2 or 3 drain waste penetrations in the slab. So, you know, it was $300 or $400 for the Termimesh guys. And then I'd also tell you that there are some newer termite products like Termidor rather, that are less toxic and can be applied once every 10 to 20 years and do a great job protecting an existing structure. So that's what we'll end up doing on this house as well.
Right. Gary Furman. Hey, Gary. How are
Hey,
you?
Gary.
What was the strategy where you used 3 glazed versus 2 glazed on the house?
Yeah, I tried to get into that a little bit in the video, Gary, but when I started the project, I honestly was really budget conscious, and I wasn't thinking I could even get to passive house. So I started the project with a very budget conscious Geldwin window package. They've got a new product that's kind of like an Anderson 100, a composite that's part vinyl, part wood. A lot of the benefits of a vinyl window, but a lot of the looks of a crisp wood window at a pretty good cost. So I did that. I spec'd that in the whole house. And when I made the change between a remodel to, oh, we should build it new, that's when I started thinking, well, maybe I should do passive house. Well, it turns out I also changed the floor plan a little bit and the layout. So basically I ended up using double glaze in about, I don't know, 2/3 of the house, I would say. And I was able to hold off on some of the other windows, and I ordered the other third in Geldwin triple glaze. And then I was going to do a Geldwin unit on my front door and my back door, also kind of a nice budget conscious choice. But I decided to upgrade, and I haven't talked about this anywhere, but I'm doing a passive house certified door at the front and at the back door. If you're not familiar with passive house certified windows and doors, they are more expensive, typically triple glaze. But the other big deal is they're incredibly tight from an air sealing perspective. So I'm spending a fair amount of money on those two products to put in the house. So, you know, we're talking about $15,000 to $20,000 for those 2 units in my house. But
they're beautiful.
But they're beautiful. They're all wood. They're passive house certified. You know, very, very energy efficient. It's cool that passive house though has changed to a climate specific zone. And I learned this from Trey Farmer's house, which was on a CRAN tour, I don't know, a year and a half ago. Trey also works for Forgecraft. Trey did a house that's not done yet, but it's being certified. And that was one of my first questions, like, gosh, I thought you had to have triple glazed windows. And he has a mix in his house. It's about the same, like 2/3 double glaze, 1/3 triple glaze. And sure enough, he told me about the change that passive house had made, and it got my gears thinking. So I think triple glaze does make a lot of sense in our climate in the right locations, especially with big glass, like my big slider in the back of the house is this unit here. It's a giant unit. Well, giant for me. It's 7'6" tall, and what is that? 12-foot wide
feet.
kit, something like that.
12 feet. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, going to triple glaze on that, we're talking about a fair amount of BTUs gained or lost depending on the season by that big piece of glass. And, you know, window manufacturers like to talk about U factor, but if you convert that to R value, you realize pretty quickly how bad glass is as an insulator generally. You know, double glazed glass is R3, and my exterior foam insulation before I even go into the studs is R13. So, you know, you start getting big glass, and you realize quickly how much BTUs are gained or lost through that glass. Triple glaze makes sense even in this climate when you're doing bigger units. Sorry for the nerdy response, Gary. Go ahead, Kit.
Well, I don't. Did you even mention that you went with the Geldwin Auraline windows everywhere else? So, which is a brand new line of windows from Geldwin.
Yeah, Chris. Chris, you sell Geldwin? Is Chris Brown still on the call? He's on mute over there. I can't remember who the. Chris, are you guys selling Geldwin?
We have access to Geldwin. We don't really promote it, but they do have that new line that we're kind of excited about that you've used.
Yeah, so Auraline is what I've used mostly in my house. They actually delayed their launch a little bit. Some of the stuff that's happened with us recently with COVID has delayed them, so it's probably not going to be available now for the general public until fall or maybe even Q4. But keep that on your radar. Geldwin Auraline. It's a pretty nice, very crisp product at a really nice price point. It's less expensive than a wood window, more expensive than vinyl, but a lot of nice details from an architect's perspective, and pretty darn good performance for the price. All right, Maggie, what's next up? What did we
Let's
miss?
see. So Shen Jenkins would like to know if you have any opinion on zip R panel versus polyiso plus aluminum flash, Aluma flash.
Oh, great one. Just to kind of repeat the question, I think what Shan's asking is, zip R, which is an insulated, pre-insulated zip, is relatively new to the market. It's only been on the market 3 or 4 years. And I use that actually at my garage. I don't know if you caught that in the video, but if you can see that right there, that's the wall that separates my garage from my house right there. I used it there because I wanted something really easy to air seal and to give me a thermal break. I like Zip R. I think it's a great way to add a lot of benefit without a whole lot of change to the architecture, without having to go to the detailing that we did with thick exterior insulation. But if you really want thick exterior insulation, you're going for passive house. There's nothing like truly putting that blanket on the outside of the house. And I would say if you're doing traditional houses with overhangs, Zip R is a great choice. But if you're doing more modern architecture, like we typically do for my construction company, Aluma Flash, which is a peel and stick product by Polywall, is a really bomber product for this climate zone. It's an aluminum face peel and stick. They make all their fluid applieds to go with it. And I use that on a lot of my projects. I've got a Michael Shoe house going right now that has no overhangs, very high exposure. Aluma Flash is the way to go on those houses. Great.
We have one more that's typed in right now. And if anybody else has any questions, please type them in. Oh, got one. Did you have to get any engineering judgments from any of the exterior envelope manufacturers for any of your unique details?
No, I got all that really from my local engineer. Because none of my loads were particularly large, if I would have had a 4-foot overhang that I was bolting on, that would have been one thing. But I'm bolting on a 2-foot overhang. It wasn't a hard decision. It was all pretty straightforward. And these new power lags by Spax and Simpson, and I think there's a couple other manufacturers. The load values on those, the engineer told me, are incredible. There's no pre-drilling, and yet they have the same load capacity as a traditional lag that you would have to pre-drill and then put in with a ratchet set. So it made it pretty easy to do those details. It's a pretty interesting product category that's only been on the marketplace a few years.
Great. We have one more from Dustin Adams. Would you please talk a little bit more about the roof corner detail in terms of how the roof exterior rigid insulation meets the wall exterior rigid insulation? Are the panels staggered or mitered?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to walk over there too. Yeah.
Yeah, once you scroll up on that.
In fact, actually, and Matt, you've got Steve's details, I think, right there. I don't know if you can pull one of those in, but I'm going to walk up. So, essentially, I mean, fortunately, Matt's got all these killer videos on everything. But on his Monopoly House video, if you go to that, and then he follows that up with showing this exterior insulation. But I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if I can share my screen. Maggie, is that coming through where you're looking at the eave here? So, so essentially that they hung the 2 layers of the insulation that was coming off the roof.
Go around to the gable side, kid. It'll be easier to see.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, look up right there.
Are you seeing that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've got the sun like right in my eyes, so you guys tell me if it's coming through. But
it looks great.
I'm going blind because I'm looking straight at the sun right now. But yeah, but essentially that just trim it off the chamfering off the top layers of the insulation off the roof, and then bring that in with the insulation on the wall, butts right into it, and then that's taped off. But you can't really see that from here. So I don't know, Matt, if you're able to snag that detail, because that's what I think the audience would love to see, is just that,
Yeah, is it,
how that wraps.
I'm assuming that the roof insulation comes in over the wall insulation and then
That's
it's
right.
taped at that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Great hand
basically
motions.
we ran the roof first, and the roof is 2 layers. So the roof is what is it, 22.8 or something like that. The roof insulation is derated a little bit compared to the wall insulation. So I've got 4 inches in the roof, and that overhangs the wall by 2 inches. So that when my wall insulation comes up, I've got my roof insulation just butted to it. And then in a few places, just to be nerdy, if there was any gaps from a non-perfect fit, we used a little bit of orange spray foam that I left over from another job, just to capture those other 7 BTUs that could be lost in that spot. That was over the edge even for me, but I thought, well, what the heck, I might as well.
I mean, when in Rome.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, we don't have any more questions, but this was great and super informative. We got up to 70 people watching,
Awesome.
which I think is really great. That's about on par with what we get at live CRAN tours. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Matt and Kit, for presenting. This was great.
Thanks, Maggie. I
That was
appreciate
fun.
that.
Yeah.
Hey, on the video, I actually I'm going to turn this into a YouTube video as well. I want to promote AIA membership and especially CRAN membership around the country. A lot of builders follow my lead, and so I want to encourage them to join AIA local chapters and get involved with CRAN in particular. But I want to say a huge thanks to Kit and to Steve. We often talk about this 3-legged stool of the architect, the client, and the builder. But I actually like a football term, since we don't have any sports in our lives right now. I like that, the owners are like the owner of the football team. Kit and Steve were like the coach on the sidelines, and I'm a little bit like the quarterback. There's a bunch of people that made this happen, and none of them were me. I've got a fantastic frame carpenter, Madera Framing. I've got an incredible HVAC company. I've got just incredible subs, most of them that I've worked with the whole 15 years I've been here in Austin. And I get to be the quarterback and say, here's what I want to do, guys. But they're the ones that actually execute the plays and get tackled and get hurt on the field and are exposing themselves daily to the world. So I want to say thanks to any of those guys watching this as well. Lastly, I did mention a couple links. I'll put those on Instagram today and Twitter. And when I publish the video, I'll put those in the description too, so you can grab those links if you want to read more about Perfect Wall from Building Science Corporation.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, guys. And please, everybody that joined, please give us feedback on how it was. So far, we're getting great feedback on the Q&A chat. We're hoping to continue this next month and the following. So if you have any projects that you'd like to showcase, please send them to Mari or myself. Julie at the AIA is our CRAN liaison. So thanks again, and everybody stay healthy and safe and continue doing great work.
Thanks, Maggie. I really appreciate it, y'all.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day,
Bye.
everybody. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.